Look, day one that I get into office, I'm going to start working on getting you a basic income. And I hope within 12 months, every single Californian will get some check of some amount that actually starts to improve their life.
Welcome to Team Futurism. My name is Peter Clarke, and we are recording with a live audience today at Amatoria Fine Art Books in Sacramento, California. And I am here with Zoltan Istvan, who is a futurist and New York Times bestselling author who is currently running for governor of California. Zoltan, welcome to Sacramento.
Thanks so much for having me here. This is a wonderful bookstore. I'm really happy.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, you are distinguished from all the other candidates in a number of different ways. I want to maybe run through a couple of them today. One of which is that you started out as an author. Tell me a little bit about your backstory as a writer.
Well, sure. You know, I always wanted to be a writer, and I think it kind of goes back to some of the sail trip. I sailed on a sailboat 2/3 around the world for about 7 years. You know, the main cargo of the sail trip was books, about 500 plus books. And I always wanted to be a writer since a young age. During the sail trip, I started doing journalism for sailing magazines. And that really kind of got my toes wet with, covering stories. But it was after that after college, I began working for the National Geographic Channel, where I started really penning a ton of articles, and I did 55 articles, I think, in total for National Geographic. But by the end of that 5-year stint, which I was like maybe 30, I was hooked as a writer, and then I began writing fiction and things like this. And in fact, even part of my degree at Columbia University was philosophy and religion in writing. So I was really studying literature in terms of how it applied in philosophy and religion.
Awesome. Tell me about your world travels, because that's also something that I think is very fascinating and distinguishing from other candidates. You have traveled, you said 2/3 of the globe, and you ended up writing for National Geographic. I know that part of the story is that you worked to something involving landmines, something involving surfing down volcanoes. Give me a little bit of the backstory of your work as an adventurer, explorer.
Sure. Basically, I lucked into this dream job at National Geographic right out of college. And it was right as the mini DV camera was being born. So the mini DV camera kind of turned changed broadcast journalism, because all of a sudden, instead of these like 6-foot long cameras that weighed 80 pounds, you now had this 5-pound device that was this big, and you could go around the world and get broadcast quality footage. And that really meant that a whole bunch of non-expert, non-professionals such as myself, someone that's right out of college, could go and get good stories as long as I could find the good stories. And so National Geographic Channel gave me a break, sent me to Vanuatu, and I did all sorts of crazy things there, like did volcano boarding, a sport that to some extent, I was the creator, the originator of this sport. People are now doing it all over, and it kind of caught on like wildfire. But I mean, I did a ton of stories there, and then they gave me more commissions, and I started covering conflict zones, and I did big ones in Kashmir between Pakistan and India, and then I did a lot of things in South America with shamans. And so, I did 55 stories overall, and it was just a wonderful time in my life. But really, it was filled with adventure, and I also pitched my own stories, so I did stories that I wanted to do.
How did you transition from that to becoming a recognized futurist and transhumanist?
So I had a very close call when I was in Vietnam for National Geographic. I was doing a story on bomb diggers, where basically like the Vietnamese farmers, they can make like $1 a day, and they work their butts off. It's quite sad. It's not much money for a lot of hard work in the fields. But because we dropped an enormous amount of bombs, and a lot of 15% of those bombs, this is during the Vietnam War, went unexploded, the demilitarized zone is completely filled with metal. Unexploded ordnances, but metal as well. And so if you're a farmer making $1 a day, but there's a bomb out there that can make $1,000 in one day, you might go out and take your chance. But the problem is the whole demilitarized zone is filled with landmines, and also getting these bombs is dangerous because sometimes they explode. But a whole giant like workforce of maybe 10, 20,000 young men, almost exclusively, say to their parents, I don't want to work in the fields, I want to become a bomb digger. And oftentimes they change the fortunes of their families, but just as often, in fact, more often than not, they get their leg blown off or they get blown in half by a landmine or a bomb exploding. So I went for National Geographic to do this story, but I myself had a very close call with a landmine. Some of the landmines are totally still buried, and some are half unburied. You don't always know. You got to pay attention, and they don't all look the same either. And there was one very close to where I was stepping off the path trying to get a shot, and my guide kind of pushed me out of the way and said, look. And I didn't see it, and I just like freaked out that moment. Because it's hard to explain, but you're 5 days in the jungle covering this story, and all you're worrying about every single step, even if you're on the paths, is landmines. So I just had like an epiphany go off, and I was kind of like done. I went back to my hotel. The story was over. Thankfully, it was like the last day, but I didn't have it in me to return anymore to do that kind of conflict zones or cover war zones. And so I went back and wrote the novel, The Transhumanist Wager, which was really a story about someone who wants to live indefinitely. I think what happened is that landmine scared me so badly that I really was done with kind of really dangerous work like I had been doing. And now I want to focus my life on the movement of transhumanism or life extension, of using science and technology to overcome death. And that was a night and day switch because of that landmine.
When you wrote The Transhumanist Wager, what inspired you to write that? Was there a direct connection between, like, you just didn't want to die, and then where did the ideas for that novel, that story come from?
Sure. Well, I think what happened is, I guess from a young age, I was always attracted to science fiction. And at Columbia University, I was very interested in literature. And in English class, they presented us with a magazine article on cryonics, I believe Time magazine. And it was the very first time I'd realized, after reading the article, that there were people around the world working on trying to overcome death. Now, I'd been raised a Catholic, went to Catholic school, but I sort of lost my faith in my teenage years and was really kind of desperate that the fact that eventually we were going to die, that really bothered me for some reason. I kind of thought that was a flaw in the system of life in the universe. And what happened was, after reading about the cryonics article, I realized, wow, there are scientists out there really trying to overcome death. Maybe they're not close yet, but at least they have real scientific method type of theories and ideas, and they're testing them and this kind of thing. And I was a changed man. I mean, I came out of that English class and said, this is what I wanted to do with my life. Now, I still later went to National Geographic and did all these dangerous things, but I never really forgot that moment. And I think it was that moment of the cryonics magazine versus what I'm with the landmine in Vietnam was really the kind of connection when I said, I'm going back to that moment where I can now do something. And so I came back to the United States after Vietnam and just began writing full time The Transhumanist Wager. And, it did well enough to launch my career as like a public person in this field and promoting it. And, I got just very lucky with that. But I was also, I guess I was super passionate about not dying.
Right. So this is one of the things that I just love about books and art and literature. You almost cannot find a futurist, a transhumanist, or scientist out there who wasn't directly influenced by some book or some novel, whether it's Elon Musk or you or anybody. So speaking of your books, okay, I want to transition to your current run for governor. And I think that it's interesting because a lot of your ideas that you're currently promoting at some level are kind of tied to your writing. So I want to read to you a couple of titles from your essays. And I want to have you just kind of broadly respond about how your ideas and your writing have influenced your current policy positions. So this is the book, Philosophy and the Future. This is a collection of essays. Let me read a couple of titles here. Will capitalism survive the coming robot revolution? When does hindering life extension science become a crime? The New American Dream, let the robots take our jobs. How brain implants and other technology could make the death penalty obsolete. An AI global arms race is looming. Technology will replace the need for big government. And finally, one more, facing up to facial recognition and why we should embrace it. So there's a lot there. Some of which is controversial, some of which is increasingly becoming obvious. Like an AI arms race is looming. Maybe at the time that wasn't obvious. Now it's like it's headline news almost nonstop at some level. How did your thinking about these topics lead you into politics, and how do they currently inform some of your policy positions?
Well, so I guess going back, what happened was after I wrote the novel The Transhumanist Wager, I reached out to try to write, kind of journalism articles, and also helps that I might be able to promote the book. And so very quickly I was just super lucky again. Psychology Today gave me The Transhumanist Philosopher, which was really the first mainstream philosophy kind of blog. Then Ariana Huffington gave me a blog at the Huffington Post. Now that was the one that blew open everything, because at the time the Huffington Post had such wide reach, and then MSN and Yahoo picked up all the articles. So, and then Vice came on board, and most of those articles you read were Vice because my writing was improving by then. And they gave me a column called Transhuman. I think just the Transhumanist. And so very quickly I penned together about 150 wild articles over a 3 or 4 year period, almost all of which you just read. And not all of them were either based anything having to do with the Transhumanist Wager. Not all of them were actually my own personal philosophies. A lot of them was just because finally a transhumanist had this possibility to get their work out into mainstream media. It had never happened before. At that point, transhumanism was a fringe movement. I mean, now we kind of know the term, and a lot of people talk about it, and even, politicians might throw out the term here and there, whatever. We all know what we speak about. But at the time, this seemed way too far out there. So I was really writing about all sorts of things. And also, as I was running for president during some of those in 2016 for the Transhumanist Party, I had the, leeway to write anything I wanted that had to do with with crazy ideas. So for example, like using instead of capital punishment where we kill people, we could use take their minds and put them in a vat and change their minds either that way or permanently have them in very Minority Report kind of ideas. But the point was, like, this was something that mainstream media was now considering, and whenever I'd write an article, 4 or 5 journalists would write articles about it. So then we'd all explore these ideas together. And it was a wonderful time of journalism. I got to say, it's pre-AI journalism, because all these things have been cut. There's no more jobs like that. There's no more columns like that. It's like that wild world is gone. But at the time, in 2016, 17, 18, and 19, maybe 2020 as well, it was still this really wonderful time where you could just blog and say really wild things, right or wrong, and get it out. I mean, a lot of them do tie into my politics, but a lot of them were just, let's explore this idea as we would if we were a philosophy student writing an essay.
So that's right. You did initially jump into politics with the US Transhumanist Party, which you founded. And it still exists. I get their emails once a week.
They're going strong.
They're going strong. And I've actually interviewed the current president of it, I believe.
Yeah, the chairman, Generity.
Chairman, yes, he's been on the podcast. Why are you not still with them, and why are you running as a Democrat today?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're running for a third party, you're not running to win. You're running to get a message out, which was great. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to tell the world in my first presidential campaign in 2016 that we need to start incorporating life extension, existential risk, transhumanism, and worries about AI into our politics. Because at the time, nobody was even talking about it at all. And so it was kind of like I was the very first science candidate talking about these things. And that went really well in terms of media coverage, not in terms of voting. We weren't on any ballots. To actually run for the presidency is totally insane. Don't get me going. But it takes a minimum of $25 million pretty much to get onto the ballots. And so on all of them. So really only 3 or 4 political parties actually can get people onto the ballots. And and then I ran a couple other times. For example, I ran for governor of the Libertarian Party. I was their endorsed candidate. They didn't like me very much because I was too left-leaning. And then I ran directly against Trump on his own party in 2020. And that was really just to run against Trump because nobody was doing it. And again, to bring up ideas of AI. It shocked me, for example, that, Trump and Biden, or before even Hillary and Trump, wouldn't discuss any of these pertinent issues like artificial intelligence. And they're still not. It's just like a taboo subject because there's nothing good to say about it because we know it's going to take so many jobs. But the point was that I've weaved my way around, and I'm not a party person. And so I just say it just so your listeners don't hate me, because a lot of people are very much like, oh, he's a grifter, he's just drifting. And it's not like that at all. I remain very true to most of my policies all the way through the last 15 years. It just happens to be that I'm more interested in science and transhumanism and discussing AI. But my wife, she works at Planned Parenthood. She's always been a solid Democrat. There's no escaping that I kind of always was living in a Democrat household. So now I'm running for governor as a Democrat, and I do feel like I'm home. It was kind of inescapable that I would end up here, especially if I was ever to run in California. It really doesn't even make sense to run as anything else where I live in the Bay Area. I mean, I think the voting contingency is 86% Dems. So it's like, it just doesn't make sense. But more importantly, it's also just to keep a favor with my wife and just to maybe actually try to make a real effort to win or at least end up in the top 3.
Yeah, I was living in Oakland a number of years ago, and I think it was something like 94% of the population voted Democrat in Oakland, which is like, yeah, you're right. If we're going to be in California,
yeah, if you want to be serious, and I think what happened is after I just graduated from Oxford, and I launched my winery business, so I took a few years off politics and running, and I tried to beef up the resume, and now I feel like it's, even if you look at the resumes of the other candidates, I mean, I do stand out. And I have a bigger social media than the majority of them, even if they have been in office before. So I have a much better shot now of actually running to win, as long as I'm not held, in contempt for running once as a Republican or something like that. If people can accept that I've been faithful to my science policies and my ideas all along, then maybe they'll allow me in and say, you know what, Zolt has a chance. We've seen him with Mamdini in New York City, so I think outsiders now maybe do have a real chance to show up to the game and be powerful and maybe even end up winning. I don't know.
Yeah, it isn't very interesting time in politics right now because of the outsider factor and also because of the technology factor. And at least in my mind, I know that I, have a podcast called Team Futurism, and I think about these things probably too much, but it does have this sense that someone like you, like this is the moment, or the Andrew Yang, right? Like, because Andrew Yang was talking about UBI for a very long time, almost too early, he came too early, right? Do you have a sense like this is the time? Is this like a moment for a transhumanist or a futurist or a Zoltan or an Andrew Yang?
Well, yeah, and let me just say, I have dropped the word transhumanism from the campaign. I talk about it with you because I know we know each other's history, but tonight when I give a talk or whatever it is, I'm avoiding it just because I don't want to scare people and cause chaos. I want to approach this as, look, this is Zoltan. He worked in National Geographic. He just graduated from Oxford. He's running. He has got some interesting ideas, and he's a world-renowned futurist. Let's talk to him about AI and see if this appeals to the larger base of the party. So that's really where I'm approaching the gubernatorial run now, and not so much in my novel or anything like that. I'm like keeping it on the down low. But I think there is room right now for outsiders, especially in the Democratic Party, which seems to have lost itself. I mean, we have an entire U.S. government that's now run by Republicans. I think the Democratic Party is looking for new faces, new voices. I hope, and they don't turn too far left in that search, because I think that may have been, part of the problem why they kind of lost so much. I think they need to get back to their old school policies, maybe like closer to Obama era ideas, even Bill Clinton, where they're just like, look, we care more about the people than conservatives do, and we're going to do more for them, but we're not going to get involved in these culture wars, which really throws off everyone. And what I'm trying to bring to the table is saying, listen, we actually have a real war on our hands, and that war is that AI is going to steal millions of jobs over the next 3 to 5 years. And if we don't have a backup plan like basic income or something like that, people are going to pick up their pitchforks, and there's going to be chaos on the streets. Already there's chaos in the streets because people are so upset with how inequality has grown. No one can afford anything. So can you imagine how much worse it's going to get? So what I'm going to try to do is, in my gubernatorial run, is tell people, look, we can maximize what AI can do for society, that either through a basic income or through humanoid robots in our household taking our chores over, or things like that. But whatever it is, or even just taking a share. I mean, even Sam Altman said something in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was today, where there can be a portion of what the wealth that AI generates be shared. And I totally agree with that. I think at some point we need to find abundance for everyone in a world where AI is dominating everything. And this is my message to the Democratic Party and as well as to potential voters is the other candidates don't even talk about AI because they got no message at all and there's nothing good to say about it. But I'm being honest, forthright. Look, it's going to take millions of jobs. We're saying within 5 years it's going to take half of California's jobs, and those jobs are never going to return. We are never going to be better than a robot in anything within 24 months because these robots are going to be as agile as Olympians and smarter than us in basically every way. So you can't compete if the market is capitalism. And as long as it remains capitalism, you're not going to be able to beat them. So how can we keep people happy, thriving, having prosperity? I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to do that, but the abundance that AI is going to create has to be shared, and we're going to have to force it. The American dream is going to have to change to something that's more than working 9 to 5 to become rich, but more of just enjoying yourself because automation has made human life more leisurely.
So what role exactly do you want the government to play there? I know that you have this term, automated abundance economy, which is, like you were saying, it's a little bit of a pivot away from capitalism, because the masses are no longer generating the wealth. It's like robots or AI generating the wealth in this future that you're seeing. Where is the government there? Is the government regulating companies in the what they can and can't do with AI? Is it just like somehow taking some money off the top? Is it taxing robots? What role do you see the government playing in the future?
Well, I think one thing that's going to happen is AI is going to force a lot of people more to the left. And the reason that's going to happen is because it's like when you get into a war, a world war, for example, you tend to look more towards your government. What are you going to do to make sure that people aren't running up the beaches with guns? And that means that we all kind of become more of a collective kind of, look at how the world operates. And the same thing's going to happen with AI is as soon as we see, and this is already happening, if you're a college graduate in mechanical engineering and you just came out of college, I have no idea what you're thinking about doing. If you're a coder, the same exact thing. I mean, the field is changing so rapidly. In 6 months' time, it's hard to imagine that even 1% of coders are going to be able to contribute something to coding that a computer can't do in a fraction of the time. So we're really we're faced with this huge problem. So I think government must get involved, and I think government's going to have to create a basic income. That's my first plan of the automated abundance economy. Create a basic income, and even if that's only a few $100s at first for California, I would say do it, because there's no escaping this. Like when you lose 30, 40, 50, and there people are saying we're going to lose 90% of the jobs within 10 years. That's not me. I think it's more than that, but this is like other experts. I think you're talking about something that's far worse than depression. Far worse. So And those jobs are never come back. You're never going to say, oh, there's another window that I'll get a job 3 years from now. No, because the robots will be better then, far better. So we're all going to be doomed unless we find, I think like something like this bookstore could actually last a long time, because you can't make this up through robots. This is great. And maybe being a barista at a local coffee shop will work. But if you're a mechanical engineer and you work for a big company, it's just so much more affordable. So it's really going to be a doomsday scenario with a job apocalypse. However, if government can step in and give us a basic income, maybe give us humanoid robots. This is one thing that I'm saying with the automated abundance economy, is that we give every California household one of these robots. So just so your listeners know, probably within 12 months, 18 months for sure, there will be robots in people's houses that they're already starting to be sold in Japan and China right now, that can cook and clean and do things, and that already are like able to, empty the dishwasher. I mean, I hate emptying the dishwasher. I have to do it all the time because I can't get my daughters to do it. Anyways, but the point is, these things will be here very quickly. And if we can give one to every California household, we can reduce 10 hours of chore work for every single person in California. And that's a lot. Because imagine if you didn't have to do chores. Imagine you could just tell your robot, I want filet mignon tonight. That would be wonderful. But these are the kinds of things the automated abundance economy can bring us. It's not necessarily money you have to give people. You just have to give them technology that allows them to feel like they're living a totally leisurely and luxurious life. And if you can do that, you can raise the standard of living for everyone and still keep capitalism intact. Because automated abundance economy is a bridge to socialism, but in no way should it ever be classified as socialism. It's just saying for the majority of people, especially those who lose their jobs, we need to pick them up and give them something because they're never going to find jobs again. And it's more important that they don't pick up their pitchforks. We want them to pick up books or go do another PhD or whatever it is they want. If they want to play guitar in the Bahamas, that's fine with me. But let's make it so that they can do that. And let's still let capitalism thrive at the top so that it can still provide this abundance for the rest of us. So automated abundance economy is definitely not a socialistic endeavor, but it is a bridge to more collectivism in terms of providing for those who lose their jobs. And at some point, that could be 90% of us.
I do think that when people go to the polls to vote for California governor, I think this is an exciting pitch and something that a lot of people will be curious about. I don't think it's what they're going to be voting on. I think that if you were to poll a room like this, which I did just like a little bit, people are going to be voting on affordability of housing and cost of living kind of broadly. What is your pitch to the average Californian that I can't afford my rent, everything's too damn expensive, and everything's getting more expensive? For a variety of reasons, some of which we could certainly name, that happen to do with the federal government, perhaps. What is your pitch to them? How are you going to make the average Californian's life easier, better, more abundant?
Well, so me and the team and I, we're thinking that by the time June rolls around, like right now you're hearing a lot about AI and you're already hearing the angst by graduates who aren't getting jobs and the job market's like in Silicon Valley is like shut down basically. But I think every month from here, that's going to get worse. And Christmas is going to be a really crazy time as people start saying, oh my God, this AI thing is real. And then as we get into the new year and you start actually seeing these humanoid robots on the streets, you're just seeing images right now, but they are literally coming. There are factories being built both in America and China for producing millions of these things. I think my time might come where the message that I'm saying, while might, sounding sci-fi, might actually hit more. But I agree with you. What, people really want to hear, and this is why my main message is still, look, day one that I get into office, I'm going to start working on getting you a basic income. And I hope within 12 months, every single Californian will get some check of some amount that actually starts to improve their lives, gives them money for rent, money for healthcare, money for that broken car that they can't fix or something like that. But we would love to, beyond that, my team and I want to use technology to create things like affordable housing. And I won't give you, I've talked a lot about technology. Let me just get back down to basics though. For those who know me, they're going to say, and they're going to be honest, Zoltan is probably the most right-leaning of all the significant Democrat candidates because I come from a libertarian and a fiscally responsible background. So if I get into office, I'm going to do away with an enormous amount of the building regulation regulation that has literally destroyed my real estate business that I had. I mean, it hasn't destroyed it, it's made my real estate business hasn't grown in 4 years after growing wonderfully for 20 years. We're going to do all sorts of other things like, yes, I would like to try to reduce taxes. I think it's insane. I just had to register my car the other day. It was like $500 something. And I got a speeding ticket recently too. It was like $497. Look, the average person can't afford these things. Who can afford a $500 ticket? Just out of the blue. Yes, you're speeding and maybe things, we shouldn't be speeding and we should go slower. That's fine. But I think that kind of price, I'm sure half the tickets aren't being paid for that because people are like, no, forget this. And then they drive and then you get arrested. The whole system has to become cheaper. And you need a firm hand at the top just saying these miscellaneous expenses that are killing us have to go away. And the Democrats are going to hate that. But at the same time, if you don't do that, nothing ever is going to get cheaper. And you open the window for Republicans and conservatives to do better in elections because that's naturally where people are going to go. That's what happened in many ways with the country. So I think I would approach the gubernatorial race from a point of, I'm going to be that Democrat who's centrist, maybe even slightly right-leaning in terms of the Democrat category to make it affordable for people.
Great. So we have a hard stop coming up. I want maybe a couple more questions before we have to wrap it up. One of these questions is just related. So let me set this up a little bit. And I know that you are not a fan of California's high-speed rail because of all the money that we've sunk into it with very little to show for it. At the same time, I feel like there's a backdrop of a lot of very ambitious projects that are just sitting there in California waiting to happen, like Forever California, the new city that they want to build between here and San Francisco. Other things like that I know people are excited about, and there's like a vision there. What is a big project, or what is your vision for California in that how we could make ourselves actually look like a thriving, state like we are, but like if you just like walk down any random street in California, you don't necessarily get that impression as you do, I hear, if you're like in Shanghai or something, right? Like,
no.
What can we do to make it so that we do enter the future?
So listen, I was skiing in Tokyo, or skiing in Japan recently, so spent some time in Tokyo, and I just took my family, my vacation, the summer vacation with my kids was to Nova Scotia, Canada, and I got to say, both places just shocked me at how much better they are run than our major cities, and being in their cities. It's like you can lose your wallet in Tokyo and nobody will touch it, or somebody will put it up on a shelf, maybe with a sign or something. It's crazy, the honor and the safety, and like you could lose your child in Tokyo, I think, and feel very safe. It would be returned. The point is, and same thing with this cleanliness of Canada blew me away, as well as the friendliness. When you drive down to Oakland or San Francisco or LA, this is not what you feel, what a foreigner would feel if they're visiting California for the first time. They're usually shocked, like, wow, I can't believe how many homeless there are. I can't believe that there's trash all over the streets. I can't believe. So we would need to do, you need a governor who's tough. And, in my opinion, Newsom hasn't been tough. He's been very good politically in terms of like getting all these different forces to work together. And he's very against Trump, and hooray, let's just, yell at Trump all day long. But that's very different than governing and actually having a society where you walk, downtown in Oakland and feel safe. That's just not the case anymore. I got to be honest, even I came here and into your wonderful city, but I was very cautious. I had my backpack in my car because I was traveling. I have to worry where I parked. I don't want my car broken into. This is not something you even think about in Canada or Tokyo when I went there recently. So something has to change. And I know every single person in San Francisco has had their car broken into. You're not allowed to leave bags
absolutely.
In your
I
car.
lost a laptop.
When did it become like this? It became like this in the last 8 to 10 years. I can tell you that. It wasn't so bad before. There was always, California's never been perfect, but still, to bring California to popularity again and to be a real visionary leader in culture and things like that, first off, we would have to clean up our act. And that means being tougher on crime and some of these other things. Two, improving our education systems and all that. But two, I think a basic income could be one way that we culturally lead not only America forward, but the world forward. AI is going to be hitting everywhere at every place so quickly here that if we lead this forward, everyone will use us as an example and say, look, if California can do it and they have all sorts of problems, then we can do it too. So that's a huge thing that I would be pushing. But I do think, and I've seen this recently with the mayor in San Francisco, the new mayor, San Francisco has cleaned its act up in literally 6 months since that gentleman has been in office. He just put his foot down and said, listen, no more of this shenanigans. And now every time I go in there to talk, it's become a better place. It's far better than it was a year ago. So it does take good leadership, and leadership that's just sometimes going to use what you might call tough love to get the job done. And I think we don't have a governor or many Democrats in office right now that are willing to do that because they're worried about offending their voter base. But I think if you can get someone in there who's going to be tougher, you can clean up a lot of things without being a conservative. And that's the main thing. We can do a good job of governing without being a Trump person.
Really quick, California Forever, the mega city project between here and San Francisco. Are you a fan, no fan?
I'm an absolute fan. And in fact, that would just be one of probably 20 or 30 I would try to launch. Look, the biggest problem with housing is that, like, I live in Marin County, okay? There's like an endless amount of beautiful land out there to build plenty of housing. Nobody will touch it. The environmentalists are like, no, the hooted owl, the whatever the animal it is, there's all sorts of animals that are all like, always on the endangered list. And so you can't do anything. And of course, you can't build. And what happens is that housing just goes through the roof. Listen, a governor has to walk in and open up this land, and just put a mandate down and say, listen, I'm sorry, whether you like it or not. I'm not trying to destroy NIMBYism and change people's towns. If people don't want to build more in their little towns, that's fine. But let's create brand new towns, brand new infrastructure. It's going to create a ton of new jobs. I mean, millions of new jobs. And it's going to create a lot of new money because people are going to be able to move here finally and find affordable housing. So open up the wilderness of California to do that. I'm not saying open up the national parks, but open up, there's like 40 million acres in California that are literally sitting there empty. We have plenty of land to build cheap and affordable housing and create brand new communities. And Walmart and Target and all these places are dying for us to do so they could build their infrastructure in as well. But right now, the way it works is the environmentalists are just saying no to that. Whereas I would go in and say, listen, we're going to have to find a compromise and we're going to build brand new cities. So I very much support the new city idea.
Yeah, I know that Jason from the All In podcast, his pitch, like tongue-in-cheek, but is that if I were to become president, I would build 9 megacities in America. And he's for like the Matt Iglesias 1 billion Americans vision. Where are you, speaking of which, my last big topic here is immigration. Big topic. I know that if you want to really, I mean.
the hardest one.
Well, we are a border state, and I know that people in California have a lot of opinions about immigration. Right now, it is, I mean, it touches a lot of technology issues, but it also is just raw politics right now. What is your take on immigration?
Sure. Well, I would stop the raids. They look terrible from a perspective of any humanitarian perspective. I just think that's not the way to approach that. I'd probably also stop a lot of immigration into California until we get a better handle of the costs. Like, for example, I wouldn't, my basic income wouldn't apply to illegal aliens, But if you're going through the process of becoming legalized, then I think maybe that's something we could talk about. There are reasons to provide health care to keep, people on their feet and working and paying taxes. But I would absolutely stop the raids, and I don't really know. I think that's, I think Trump's just getting himself in trouble with that. Most Republicans are like, wow, this just looks bad. I mean, so, but the topic of immigration is tricky because we are spending so much money on it, and they have been growing the California economy by letting in so many immigrants. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of life is improving for the average Californian. So we have to find a better balance there. So I would probably stop a lot of the immigration until we have a better grasp on how to get them here and be happy and acclimate to the kind of culture that we live in, so that we have, maybe less violence, less things like that. So I am pro-immigration, especially coming from immigrant parents, but I think it has gotten out of hands, and the Democrats have to do a better job at managing that. But absolutely no raids. Like, whatever people that are here now, we just stay, leave it, and try to assimilate them and make it so that we can become a state that's has a lot. When you look at California, you say, look, it's very humanitarian. Wow, I can't believe what Trump's doing.
So what is next for your campaign?
Well, we have a big talk on the 18th down in San Jose, so I'm excited about that. I have a lot of international talks coming up, and that's going to be great because, for example, I'm going to be
Dubai, I think.
Dubai, yes, and I'm meeting some of the ministers there of Dubai. I'm in London, also speaking at How the Light Gets In Festival, and that's wonderful. There's a bunch of Nobel Prize winners, and I'm debating some people doing the guy fully automated luxury communism. Yes,
right?
So that's going to be fantastic. And then I'm actually off to Marseille, France, and I'm speaking about longevity and to a bunch of founders of companies there in just about 10 days. It doesn't seem like I'm campaigning in California, but I have to actually take these because some of these speeches do pay, and that's how I can kind of keep myself going forward with the other things that I need to do and move around the state. But I am trying to take as many talks, as many interviews as I can, and we're trying to drum up as many donations. That's been hard coming. Small donations are always welcome because even a $1 donation adds to the ability to maybe get into the debates and stuff like that. It's all kind of a quantity game. But we have plans to travel all across the state and just talk to people and hopefully, kind of do an Andrew Yang style where you just slowly but surely build up the momentum. And hopefully by the time the next year comes, we'll be one of the top 5 candidates. I mean, I'm bigger than a lot of them in social media anyways. So, and we'll have a lot more news about us regarding the futurist and AI issues. And I think we could be very competitive if we can just get enough momentum and enough media coverage. And we're doing good so far.
Great. Well, I will link your website and your social media down below. And thank you, everyone, for watching, and thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate it. And Zoltan, good luck on the campaign.
Thank you.